Since the dawn of our species, few moments captured the raw essence of human purpose like this. A band of prehistoric hunters, cloaked in furs, kneeling low against the biting wind. Their breath fogs in the freezing air. Their eyes narrow, fixed on the towering silhouette of a mammoth moving through the snow-covered tundra. This was not mere survival. This was a sacred test of patience, discipline, and unity. No swords, no steel, no written plans, only sharpened wood, instinct, and the power of a shared mind. Here, in the silence before the charge, you see the foundation of human civilization forming. Every movement was deliberate, every glance a signal. This was more than a hunt. It was the first blueprint of organized warfare, of teamwork, of strategy beyond the self. And in taking down the mammoth, they weren't just feeding a tribe, they were defining what it meant to be human. In this story, we uncover not just a kill, but a transformation. The moment where survival evolved into something greater. Imagine a world untouched by cities, electricity, or the hum of machines. A cold, open wilderness where the wind howls like a beast and time moves with the snow. Brittle grass cracks beneath worn feet. Swirling flurries obscure the horizon. The silence is absolute, broken only by the sound of breath, footsteps, and the distant call of something ancient. This is the world our ancestors called home. There were no walls to protect them, no cavalry to call upon. Their only fortress was the group, and their only weapon, cooperation. One man alone facing a mammoth, that wasn't bravery, that was suicide. But 10 men, moving in unison, thinking as one, striking with timing, with purpose, that was strength. Success didn't belong to the strongest, it belonged to the most coordinated. Victory came not from domination, but from understanding the land, reading the wind, and trusting each other with their lives. In this frozen world, unity wasn't a virtue, it was survival itself. The hunters crouched in absolute silence. Frost clung to their eyelashes. Their breath was slow, controlled, vanishing into the wind. They waited, hidden behind a rise of earth and snow. Below them, the mammoth moved, slow, deliberate, every step shaking the frozen ground. It was not a beast of speed, but of power. And power, if directed wrong, could become a trap. The leader watched closely. He had seen this before, too many times to count. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. A glance, a raised arm, a twitch of the jaw. Signals passed through the group like electricity through wire. Whispers, finger gestures in the snow, branches used as pointers. They measured distance by eye, estimated wind by feel, studied the mammoth's gait and mood. Was it alert? Was it tired? Was it alone? Then they chose their arena. Not a battlefield, but a funnel, a natural trap, a narrow gorge, a patch of wet bog, or a slope that limited the mammoth's turn. It wasn't just terrain. It was strategy born from observation, passed through generations. They weren't just reacting to nature. They were shaping it to their will. Today, nature wouldn't be their enemy. It would be their silent accomplice. The trap was set. The mammoth stood alone, massive, unaware, but vulnerable. The hunters did not charge with fury. There was no shouting, no chaos, only movement, measured, precise, intentional. The first to step forward were known as the provokers. They were lean, fast, and fearless. Each carried a lightweight spear, honed to a deadly point. But these spears weren't meant to kill. They were meant to sting, to distract, to wear the beast down. The provokers darted in and out like wolves, targeting the joints, the tendons, the soft tissue behind the knees. They struck with purpose, never randomly. Every jab was a message. You are not safe. Every withdrawal was clean, timed with practiced footwork to avoid the tusks and crushing feet. The mammoth roared, spun, charged, flailed. But the hunters didn't break formation. They moved in rhythm, each advance followed by retreat, each assault followed by silence. It wasn't brute force, it was choreography. The goal was never instant victory, it was fatigue. To drain the beast of strength, to force mistakes, to hold it in the kill zone, just long enough for the next phase to begin. This was not a wild charge. It was a system, a living mechanism where each man had a function. Not everyone ran toward the beast. Some stood at the rear, holding heavier, longer spears meant for the final blow. Their eyes stayed sharp, their arms stayed steady. Others had a different duty: recovery. They retrieved fallen weapons scattered in snow and mud, tools too precious to lose. Speed mattered less than awareness. Even a dropped spear could cost a life. The youngest, still unready for blood, ran messages, brought water, fetched new shafts. The elders, they didn't throw spears anymore, but they held command, reading the terrain, spotting mistakes, predicting the mammoth's next move. Every generation had a place. Like an orchestra of survival, each role mattered. Each action fed the whole. Those closest to the mammoth aimed with purpose. They didn't strike blindly. They knew where it hurt most: behind the knees, under the ribs, beneath the thick hide. Every spear that flew was more than a weapon. It carried fear, and it carried the will to overcome it. The mammoth was wounded, but not defeated. It did not cower, it did not flee. It turned, and it fought. It screamed, a sound that shook the trees and echoed across the frozen plains. Its trunk lashed through the air like a whip of raw muscle. Its tusks carved great arcs in the snow, ready to split a man in half. It charged with the fury of a thunderstorm. One misstep, and a hunter could vanish beneath 6 tons of momentum. This was not a clean or safe battle. It was chaos, wrapped in discipline. Many had died in hunts before this one, crushed, gored, thrown like dolls by a beast that knew pain and remembered faces. And yet, they pressed forward. Why? Because to hesitate was to die. Because fear, though present in every man's chest, could not rule his legs. They moved with reverence, not recklessness. Every step taken as if stalking lightning, fast, but never foolish. To fight a mammoth was to dance with something older, stronger, and far less forgiving than man. The snow was stained with crimson. The mammoth, once a tower of muscle and fury, began to slow. Blood clung to its fur in frozen clumps. Its legs trembled under its own weight. Its breath came in short, heavy bursts, like distant thunder. Its eyes, wide with pain, searched the horizon, looking for an escape that no longer existed. And then, the moment came. A signal was given. No words, just a nod. The heaviest spears were raised high. Hands that had trained for this since boyhood now moved with deadly calm. With one final cry, the spears flew. They struck true, into the neck, behind the ears, beneath the ribs. Not random, not desperate, but precise. The mammoth groaned, a deep, haunting sound that made the earth tremble. Then silence. The hunters did not celebrate. There was no shouting, no joy in the kill, only duty. They approached slowly, watched its chest rise, then fall, and rise no more. Only when all movement ceased did the rituals begin. Not for victory, but for respect. The mammoth lay still. Its breath had faded into the cold. But there was no triumph. No raised fists. This was not a conquest. It was a gift. A life given so that others might endure. And the hunters knew it. Some fell to their knees in silence. Others placed offerings beside the fallen giant. Stones, feathers, carved bone tokens passed down from ancestors. A few began to sing, not songs of glory, but of mourning, of gratitude. To take a life was never just survival. It was a transaction with the sacred, a burden carried in flesh and spirit. They honored the mammoth not only for its meat or hide, but for what it represented: strength, endurance, dignity. The hunt was more than a task. It was a ceremony, a bond between predator and prey, sealed in blood, acknowledged with reverence. In this world, every kill left a mark, not just on the snow, but on the soul. Because to live off the land was to live with humility. Once the mammoth spirit had been honored, the real work began. And nothing, absolutely nothing, was left behind. The meat was carved with care, carried to fires that had been lit long before the first spear flew. Large cuts were roasted for strength. The organs, rich in nutrients, were consumed quickly, with understanding passed down through generations. The skin, thick and rugged, was stripped and softened. It became cloaks, shelter walls, blankets that held back death in the long night. The tendons were dried and twisted into cord, stronger than rope, light as hair. The bones were cleaned, shaped, sharpened. Some became needles, others became weapons, tools, sled runners, or frames for future homes. Even the tusks, massive curved emblems of power, were not trophies of ego. They were carved into symbols, worn by elders, held in ceremonies. Each part of the animal had a role. Each role carried meaning. This was not brutality. It was engineering with reverence. A system built not on waste, but on wisdom. But how did they know? How did people with no schools, no maps, and no written language develop such precision? The answer wasn't ink on paper. It was observation. It was memory. And it was the power of spoken word, passed from mouth to ear, from elder to child, night after night beside the fire. Each failed hunt taught something new. Every scar carried a lesson. Each death, whether man or mammoth, etched its message into the minds of those who survived. They watched how the animals moved, where they drank, when they rested. They noticed how the wind changed the scent, how the sun cast shadows across the terrain. Over generations they adjusted. Some dug deep pits camouflaged with brush. Others timed their hunts with the freeze of rivers, when escape was harder. Still others learned the cycles of migration, striking when the herds were most exposed. Their wisdom was not abstract. It was carved into routine. It wasn't written in books. It was lived again and again until it became instinct. In the shadow of the mammoth, something unexpected began to grow. Language. Not the kind we know today, not full sentences or written symbols, but meaning, passed through sound and motion. A sharp whistle cut through the cold air. Left flank. A snapped twig against stone. Brace for impact. A raised fist. Hold your ground. These were not just signals. They were survival tools. Code developed not in classrooms, but on frozen plains, where clarity meant life. The hunters didn't need grammar. They needed unity. And these early sounds and signs became the first threads of culture. A common rhythm. A shared instinct. And slowly, what began as tactics became tradition. Gestures turned into rituals. Sounds became stories. And stories, told again and again by firelight, shaped memory, identity, and belonging. In the dance around the mammoth, they weren't just learning to speak. They were learning to become human. Together, the mammoth is gone. Its echo no longer shakes the tundra. Its tracks are buried beneath centuries of ice and time. But its spirit? It lingers, not in zoos or fossils, but in us, in the way we organize, in the way we remember. Its bones taught us structure, how to build with what we had. Its hide sheltered us from storms. Its hunt forged something deeper than strength. It gave us community. Its defeat demanded coordination, discipline, and heart. So we honored it. We painted its image onto stone walls deep in sacred caves. We whispered its memory into myth. We carried its story from firelight to bedtime, generation to generation, because those hunts weren't just about hunger. They were about becoming. Unity, foresight, innovation. When we hunted the mammoth, we hunted fear itself. And when we stood together, we didn't just survive. We became human. We became more. At Prehistoric Shadows, we believe that prehistory isn't just a forgotten time. It's a mirror, a reminder of who we are when the world pushes us to our limits. Subscribe for more stories that breathe life into bones and awaken the silent brilliance of our ancestors.